Hello, welcome to the first episode of Peter York's Culture Wars House Party. I'm Peter York and my podcast will be about culture wars, the way modern politics is often played out with symbols and scapegoats instead of the real thing. I'll be talking to the players and the commentators in these wars and getting them to explain what's really happening. We'll have some fun and lots of gossip. And we'll ask absolutely key questions like, who makes the best suede loafers in Jermyn Street? My first guest is Michael Wolff, and next we'll be talking to James O'Brien, scourge of angry phoners at LBC. Now, the American journalist author Michael Wolff has become, I'd say, globally famous for his insights into the great power players of politics and media, people with unimaginable wealth, power and ambition. Men like Donald Trump, the subject of Wolff's three bestsellers, Fire and Fury, Siege and Landslide, and like Rupert Murdoch and his family, where the books are The Man Who Owns the News, which was back in 2012, and The Fall, The End of the Murdoch Empire, just last year. The casts of these books, the Trump family and their supporters, Trump's 2017 strategist, the extraordinary Steve Bannon, and the Murdoch family divides, the stuff of succession. The casts of Michael Wolff's books are fabulously, ragingly mad and self-obsessed. Now, Fire and Fury pictured a completely dysfunctional place where everyone was at each other's throats. And they all told Michael Wolff all about it, all the gossip, because he was on site. And it also showed a place where the Sun King, Donald Trump, was literally dysfunctional. An idiot, according to Wolff, and he's repeated it many times, someone who just can't think strategically. And recently, just before the US election this November, Michael Wolff revealed that he'd got about 100 hours of recordings of the infamous Jeffrey Epstein, financier, allegedly, paedophile trafficker of young women, and apparent suicide in August 2019. August, Epstein, recorded in 2017, talks about Trump, who he said he'd known very well, but describes as a terrible human being. All this potentially explosive, because Epstein has been a great hate figure in MAGA-land. When Fire and Fury was about to be published in 2018, Trump attempted to stop it with a legal letter. It didn't work. In fact, it publicised Fire and Fury hugely when it went on to sell 1 million copies that month, and millions more worldwide ever since. Michael Wolff, you're talking to us from a lovely place called Amagansett, I hope I'm saying it right, in the heart of the Hamptons, where posh power players, many of them from New York, convene. Now, you say Trump's an idiot who can't think beyond his nose and never takes advice, and anyone who works with him eventually falls out with him. So how come he's won so comprehensively? The popular vote and both houses giving him almost absolute power. How idiotic is that?
Well, first I want to know who makes the best suede loafers on Jermyn Street.
I can guide you to the two competitive outlets. They're very near each other. And when you're next here, we can go and look. We can buy a pair each.
Okay, that's a deal. Donald Trump is the president of the United States, or will shortly be the president of the United States again, because among his other vast deficiencies, you can certainly single him out as being the best performer in modern politics. The Trump show turns out to be, over this now long period of time, 10 years running, a riveting spectacle. It's been sort of fascinating to watch him in these last couple of months against Kamala Harris, a perfectly reasonable, predictable, recognizable politician. And I think that there is sort of no contest. She was not memorable in any way. He is memorable at every single moment. I remember one of the Trump people actually during this campaign had said to me that they only have one metric, and that's attention. The more attention that he gets, the more his numbers go up. Good attention, bad attention, it didn't make any difference. Just attention. And it was, in their analysis, attention is a zero-sum game. If he's getting it, his opponents, either in the Republican primary or in the general election, were not getting it. And that was, I think, the singular recipe that got him this win.
And nothing counted as little reservations in the back of the minds of that insignificant majority. Or people said, well, of course, he's done after this sex tapes talk. He's done after this. He's done after that. Nothing seems to have dented his campaign.
No, and I think this is part of his own psychological makeup, that he can keep pushing through everything. There is never a moment on his part of doubt. As a matter of fact, there's always the opposite. He had this disastrous debate in late September with Kamala Harris, a disaster completely. And he came off the debate stage, came to his people and said, that is the best debate I have ever had. In fact, that is the best debate anyone, anywhere has ever had. And then he went out into the spin room with all of the journalists there, and which traditionally no candidate or the debaters themselves don't do. They send surrogates. But he went out and pronounced that was the best debate. Nobody has done it better. She was horrible. I was incredible. And I've just never seen anyone in modern politics who has been able so completely and so convincingly to deny reality. Obviously, this goes back to 2020 when he pronounced, he had won the election, whereas everyone knew, everyone in his White House, everyone everywhere knew that obviously he did not. And yet he didn't break character once in all these years since then. He was cheated out of that election. And that turns out to be, if you are certain, and if you can portray your own certainty in a way that allows for no doubts whatsoever, it turns out people believe you. Now, I think you can call that the big lie, as we have at other points in the notable points in the 20th century. But it's also perhaps something beyond that. It's something about performance. It's something about reality television, really. It's as though, everybody doesn't believe that, and everyone knows you don't really believe that, but the nature of your own performance, the bravura nature, is compelling.
So it also says, doesn't it, that a very significant number, maybe almost half of all Americans, can't take too much reality either.
And they don't. They're not used to reality. Remember, most Americans, near 100% of Americans, live their life in some form within the media. They don't live it in politics. They don't live it in business. They don't even often live it in reality. They live it in the media. And so they're used to reality being packaged in the way, conservative media packages or liberal media packages it. So it's really a kind of, in the end, a competition between who can package it better.
But at the end of the day, the magic and the momentum of Trump will end up with what sound like some very real things in terms of people, his nominations, and policies. And Europeans, whom I'll cast us little English people for now, on the other side of a pond, are all very apprehensive about Trump. And when they did polls across Europe, Most Europeans wanted Harris to win, or rather Trump to lose, including people who were, by British and European standards, somewhat to the right. Europeans all very apprehensive about Trump, starting with the people, for whom he seems to have cast for big roles. Well, Matt Gaetz is out of the picture, but nonetheless, it sounded like a freak show, and the policies sound terrifying. Is it all talk, or will America be in turmoil for the next year?
Well, I think America will be in turmoil, but the nature of what they will be in turmoil about, I think they're in turmoil about turmoil. The idea that we can even begin to predict what policies are real, what policies are rhetorical, what policies will be forgotten seconds after they are propounded, we don't know. At one point during the campaign, when I said to one of the Trump people, and I still speak to many people in the Trump circle regularly, I said, okay, if he does win, what happens? And this person was quite close to Trump, kind of shrugged and said, I mean, he might spend 4 years deporting everybody, but as likely he spends 4 years playing golf. So it's very difficult to tell what is, since it all comes from Donald Trump. I mean, it is all top down. It is not a world in which there are these people who he has appointed or hired who are advising him and who are genuinely collaborators and leaders in the policies that are going to be implemented by this administration. That is not true. It is all about Donald Trump's caprice, his interest at a given moment in time, his what he sees on television, what he reads on the newspaper, what person in his inner circle he thinks is getting too big for his britches. It's a court life. It's a very mercurial court life and a very dangerous one. So all of these people coming in, the likelihood is that most of them will depart in tears in some sense, including Elon Musk.
Well, watching Elon Musk scamper on the stage like a demented teenager was very, very fascinating. Those lineups were very fascinating. But geeks I meet here talk knowingly about Project 2025, and that somehow they'll slip in this absolutely thought out set of policies and procedures somehow under Trump's nose, and they'll get away with it. And that's the real roadmap for the Trump presidency.
Yeah, well, that's what liberals say, that at some point that became the kind of mantra. It's Project 2025. As the people inside of the Trump campaign were we're very clear, that's not us, that has nothing to do with us. And in fact, what that meant, the setup there was very clearly, these are competitors for Trump influence and mind share, and they were against other people. The chief person they were against was this woman who ran the campaign, Susie Wiles is her name, and who is now the chief of staff. She was the person who was very clearly against the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025. Now, to the extent that comes in, and it is still very much in play because Trump likes to play off all of the people around him. But to say that any one group, any one position, any one theory of the case is going to rule is, I think, completely misunderstanding Donald Trump, completely ignoring the fact that we've already gone through this for 4 years, and Trump is a guy who does exactly as he has always done in the past.
I think I remember you quoting Steve Bannon saying that in order to exert power with Trump, what you had to do was get deep into some sort of subject or power base that he wasn't interested in and therefore took no notice of, and get yourself entrenched in that and wreak real change, or havoc, as some people might say, in there while he wasn't noticing.
Yeah, I think that that's accurate. The problem is that then he comes to notice if you get press, if you get attention, if suddenly this surfaces, and then you're screwed. So yes, I mean, the answer to all these questions is yes, this could happen, and it is as equally likely not to happen, or it is likely to happen and then to not happen. So the entire understanding of Donald Trump has to begin from the point of view that there is no structure here. There is no structure, there is no plan, there is no real intention except to get attention for Donald Trump himself, and that any path that does seem to suddenly seem clear is as likely to turn in the opposite direction almost immediately.
Who do you think then could be, apart from Susie Wiles, the bedrock players, the bedrock power brokers of the next Trump government, who might get some power for some time, who might survive?
Well, we don't know this yet. That is the question. You know, in the first administration, it was, the person who really held the functional power, who had the power of plan and policy, was probably Mitch McConnell. If you looked at the first Trump administration, its policies are beyond the rhetoric, beyond the fire and fury. The policies were pretty traditional policies of any conservative White House. And those policies, almost all of them, came from the Senate leadership. These are policies that were crafted and written on Capitol Hill. So will we see that again? Possibly. I don't see anyone within the greater West Wing circle having any particular power competing with Donald Trump. There's a slight difference here between the first administration in that, on the second day, he's a lame duck. So he can't run again. So the power begins to shift and ebb in most traditional second terms. A lot of thinking that will go to J.D. Vance now, that he inherits the party. Question about Elon Musk. This guy, with such vast resources, has taken such a personal interest in this administration. All these are possible. You have this Susie Wiles, who's a very crafty player, the first chief of staff who actually has a relationship with Donald Trump, a long now working relationship, who understands this guy, who understands how you have to behave around him. Does that give her a kind of special power? These are all questions.
Now, just to deal with my particular obsession here, what is to become of Steve Bannon?
Steve has just gotten out of jail. He is facing another trial in New York, which will probably put him back into jail. So I don't see, and Trump has always kept him at arm's length. So in my knowledge, he has only been with Donald Trump once in the past 6 years. So Steve Bannon has built himself a kind of, super MAGA portfolio, which largely comes from partly from his podcast, partly because he's just an excellent promoter. But that's arm's length. It really is outside. He has influence because he influences the people who have influence, and he can still, with many in the Trump circle, get on the phone and unleash a mighty stream of invective and fury, which is kind of scary. So yes, that's where he is. He is the ultimate MAGA gadfly.
From what you've said, unlikely to have a formal role.
Yes, he certainly will not have a formal role. He certainly will not have that proximity.
Well, that brings us to Elon Musk, who, as you know, has declared war on the United Kingdom.
So I hear, yes.
it's very fascinating for us. We keep on getting messages that Elon Musk doesn't like how we're doing things and we better change it pretty fast or they'll be hell to pay. When we had our riots, Elon Musk weighed in and said that the people who were being put away in the riots were heroes and martyrs and all that stuff, and that our government had a two-strand policy for different sorts of protesters. And he's not stopping. What's his future in the new offer, the new lineup?
Well, right now we have two kings of the world in the same room together. That is not a prescription for success for one of the kings. So I would say that Elon Musk has an outsized amount of power that will begin to decline precipitously as of January 20th. Because at that point, one of the kings of the world in the room will actually be the president of the United States, and one will not.
But Elon Musk clearly thinks he's going to be joint king.
Yes, clearly, and it is a wild card. We don't know. I mean, this is a person whose resources are so vast, and whose caution is so limited that we don't know what that adds up to. And let me point out the other thing, whose talent is also kind of extraordinary.
Another name that I haven't heard much of in terms of a role, formal or informal, which I'm very conscious of, is Peter Thiel. Because when I finished my latest book, newly out in the UK, Dead Cat on the Table, which is all about culture wars, and I was going back over it for various PAs and stuff like that, I realised that of the 10 big chapter stories, Peter Thiel was actually involved in some way, behind the scenes, in 6 of those 10 events, 6 of those 10 big stories, and possibly in more. And there he is, putting money on the table for people in a most extraordinary way. He hasn't got as much money as Elon Musk, but by most people's lights, he's got a lot of money, and he puts it into all sorts of things. And I think I'm right in saying he was the first person to put money on the table for J.D. Vance.
Absolutely. J.D. Vance exists because of Peter Thiel. Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's another broader story, which we don't know how it will play out, is that there are this set of men in the technology business who have accumulated resources that are, we've never seen a group of people with similar interests having such individual resources. And what they do with them, they don't know what to do with them yet. They are just finding out. So this is actually in a new chapter of these people flexing their muscles. What happens, how effective they can be, is there a backlash on this? What do they really want? Do they really want the same things, or will they ultimately battle against each other? I mean, I would say we're at the opening chapter of that story, and a good one it will be.
Now, just before the election, you made what looked like, might have been, possibly was, a sort of intervention. Because just before the election, in November, you released a sort of teaser from your 100 hours of recordings of Jeffrey Epstein, talking to you, I guess, in about 2017. And it established that he'd been very close to Trump, certainly in his own telling of it, but at the same time was terribly critical of him. And all this could have been, might still be, a bit explosive, couldn't it? What more is waiting in those tapes?
Well, there's extraordinary stuff in those tapes. I mean, the Jeffrey Epstein view of a whole set of people in power is intimate and extraordinary and insightful. Clearly, at the top of that, you have Donald Trump. Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were best friends for more than a decade. And in a very real sense, they are very similar people. And in a very real way, you might say, one of the conundrums of our time is that of these two very extremely similar people, really fused in many ways at the hip, one ended up dead in the darkest prison in America, and the other in the White House. So, I mean, I would say that in a way that is one of the key circumstances of our time.
So you're saying there's more to come?
Well, I'm saying there is more there, yes.
Yep.
Now, the background of this is, so I did these interviews with Epstein over several years, including the year that Donald Trump won the presidency. And ever since, I have been trying to do something with this material. And when I say do something, find an outlet to broadcast or some medium in which to tell this story. Nobody has been interested. I mean, this is the one story that people do not want to hear. Why don't they want to hear? I think because Jeffrey Epstein, in the minds of the media, in the minds of the gatekeepers, is one thing. He's an entirely discredited pedophile who nobody wants to hear from and nobody wants to hear that story except to confirm that he has victimized person after person after person. So the other thing that he might have insight into all of these enormously powerful people who he knew is discounted, discredited. We don't do it. At the same time, it is a story that seemingly everybody finds incredibly compelling and wants to know more about.
And you think the fence would break at some point, wouldn't you? What most people seem to be thinking about most intensely, quite simply, is whether Donald Trump shared any of Jeffrey Epstein's tastes.
Well, we know that he did. Yes. I mean, the answer is incontrovertibly yes. I mean, these were two guys whose principal interests, they had two principal interests, money and women.
Well, there's clearly more to come there, and I think people on both sides of the Atlantic and on neither will be very interested to see if and when the fence breaks on this extraordinary story. And it's an extraordinary story because, as you say, he was a very fascinating man, Epstein, and a more insightful man than he's given credit for. Now, Michael, you get around East Coast, West Coast, Hollywood, Washington, and London. Eager London friends have seen a fair bit of you, and they obviously they want some more. What will you do when you next come here? Who do you want to meet here? What do you want to buy?
I want those suede loafers.
That's a shoe-in. We'll do that. Yeah.
Whenever I like to see everybody I know. It's my best social life is in London.
That's terrific. And how do you think other smart New Yorkers, because you're in the Hamptons now, but you've got a smart place in Greenwich Village, we know this, how do you think other smart New Yorkers think about us in Little London now?
Less so, I think, as the years have gone on.
Yeah. Less important in the great scheme of things.
Less important. Year after year, less important, yes. I mean, why is that? I think it's partly because the drama here has been, and this drama, specifically the Trump drama, is now 10 years. I mean, this is a decade of Donald Trump. It's a decade in which an enormous amount of mind share is taken up with the fate of America. And it's very hard, I think about in that kind of global sense of what is important to think about anything else.
Well, it's hard talk for us, but we're very, very much aware of it. And Europeans as a whole are very, very much aware of it and feel very apprehensive about what might happen next in all sorts of ways, and the way it reacts on our politics, our defence, and our money, of course, because Nigel Farage appeared on Newsnight, the late night BBC politics programme, and told us that his friend Donald did not like something that we'd done, Diego Garcia, and said in effect, well, if you don't change it, this is a message from Big Donald to Little Us, if you don't change your policy, you'll find yourself in the 60% tariff rate with China. I'm exaggerating, but only slightly.
Only slightly, but I think before that, what you have to recognize is that what he's saying is you'll find yourself in the rhetorical bucket of the 60% tariff rate.
Yes.
So we're in a world where partly what we're dealing with is not things that are going to happen, but just the threats of things that might happen, which actually one knows will not happen, but the threats themselves establish a kind of reality, if not the exact reality, the imitation reality.
Yes. We'll get a tongue lashing.
Oh, yes, as will everyone constantly.
There's something to look forward to. The other thing to look forward to is when you come here next. So we're very eagerly looking forward to that. In the meantime, thank you very, very much for talking to us. And in the American formulation, happy holidays.
Thank you so much. And I'm dying to see you in person. So we'll make that happen surely this winter.
This winter, the authorities will be onto it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Huge thanks to Marvellous Michael Wolff. My next guest will be James O'Brien, who will be joining us after Christmas, which is almost upon us. And what better gift then than a copy of my marvellously wonderful book, A Dead Cat on Your Table, a guide to culture wars and how not to lose them. With brilliant illustrations by Martin Rosen. You will find it at all good bookshops and to order online. I hope you've enjoyed my first podcast, and I look forward to you joining me in 2025. Have a very happy Christmas.